Nearly 9 out of 10 organizations regularly use AI in at least one function, and only 39% report an impact on company-wide operating profit. Now, McKinsey classifies only 6% of those as high AI performers. So the models are being used, but the financial returns are still concentrated in a small group of companies. Why is that? I'm Sam Gaddis, and I'm a partner at Runpoint, where we build AI systems for mid-market companies. Now, we've made two bets about these companies. First, they're unusually well positioned to create value with AI. And second, some should now be considering replacing their core software that runs their business. But back to AI research, which has a timing problem. A capability study can be carefully designed and still be outdated by the time it reaches us, because the model it tested may already be several generations behind. So I went out and looked for evidence that measures the pace of change across many model generations. And one recent example is METR's Time Horizon 1.1. Published just in January of this year. Now, METR is a research nonprofit that evaluates AI systems on software, machine learning, and cybersecurity tasks. The evaluation covered 14 models, including GPT-5 and Claude Opus 4.5, and it tested them on 228 tasks and estimated the length that each could complete with 50% reliability, as measured by how long those tasks took human experts. Now, across the 2019 to 2025 series, that time horizon doubled every 7 months. And looking at only the results since 2023, the fitted pace was closer to every 4 months. So the study tells us about the direction and speed of change, but it doesn't promise the same result inside any particular company. And when METR evaluated GPT 5.6 before its June preview, it declined to call any time horizon number robust. The result changed dramatically depending on how it treated attempts by the model to exploit the evaluation itself. So even current research can lose its footing when the model changes. And that matters because capability only becomes valuable when real work moves through the business. Now imagine a mid-size manufacturer preparing a quote. The AI can draft it in seconds. But before anyone makes a promise, the company has to confirm the specifications, the material costs. There has to be engineering approval, capacity, and delivery date. Faster draft saves time, but the larger financial result only arrives when the customer accepts the quote and the company can protect its margin or schedule production or actually deliver the order. So a fast answer is useful, but it is not yet a financial return. The company still has to trust it and use it across departments. Then the surrounding work has to change enough to actually increase revenue or lower cost or reduce risk or free up cash. METR measures how much work a model can carry. But companies make money when the whole process changes. Now, McKinsey's 2025 State of AI report gives us a company-level view. It surveyed about 2,000 respondents across over 100 countries and identified a small group it calls AI high performers. Those high performers were nearly 3 times as likely to redesign workflows and 3 times as likely to report strong ownership from senior leadership. About 3/4 of these were scaling AI compared with 1/3 of the other organizations that were not performers. Because this was a survey, it can't really tell us that workflow redesigned caused the better result. But what it can tell us is that companies reporting more value were also more likely to change the work itself and put a senior leader in charge. And that makes sense operationally. 12 pilots, 6 vendors, and a steering committee can create a very impressive calendar, but somebody still needs the authority to change how the company works. And the McKinsey high performers appear to do exactly that. They choose fewer priorities, they redesign the complete workflow, and they measure changes in cycle time or cost margin or quality or risk. So how much of this pattern shows up in the mid-market, the area that we're interested in? McKinsey found that large companies were further ahead. Nearly half above $5 billion were scaling AI, compared with 29% below 100 million. But that measures current adoption. The economic opportunity still depends on the cost and complexity of changing the workflow. To look specifically at the middle market, I turned to RSM, the audit, tax, and accounting firm focused on this segment. Its survey covered almost 1,000 technology decision makers in the United States and Canada, and 91% said that their companies were using Gen AI, but among those users, only 25% said it was fully integrated into any core operations or workflows, and 92% reported some implementation challenges. So most of these companies have started using AI, but relatively few have actually changed how the company runs. Now for the mid-market, that gap actually creates a real opening. These companies spend enough on labor and software for the savings to matter while still having fewer old systems standing in the way. And believe it or not, a thinner technology stack can make implementation easier. But these projects still need authority, which is why, at least at Runpoint, we only tackle projects when the CEO is directly involved. That's really important. These projects cross departments, change who makes decisions, and ask employees to give up familiar routines. And without somebody who can settle disputes and make adoption a priority, a technically correct system can sit unused. And this is where our conclusion goes beyond the studies. As recently as last year, I would have advised most mid-market companies against rebuilding a core system because the cost of writing, integrating, testing, and maintaining it was just too uncertain. But then Opus 4.5 arrived in November of last year, followed up by GPT 5.2 in December. And what we found almost immediately was a step change function where these models could stay on longer engineering jobs and make coordinated changes across much larger code bases. In other words, they finally became usable for business. And then just last month, we get Fable 5 and now GPT 5.6. And in our work, we see yet another step change in the size and difficulty of the engineering work we complete. So I trust the direction of the METR trend more than a fixed productivity percentage tied to any one old model, because the models were only one part of the change. For us, we also built a lot of reusable code and started using open source building blocks that supplied standard features that we used to have to build ourselves. And together, those changes cut the time and costs required to build a replacement CRM or ATS or whatever it is you're building. And that's where the economics become more interesting and more testable. Compare the total cost to build and run the replacement with the recurring license cost it removes. One of our clients, Smith Mechanical, is a great example of this. We replaced Service Titan with a fixed fee field service platform that the company owns. And this new system connects dispatch, field work, inventory, and invoicing with controlled access for AI agents. And the company is going to save upwards of $250,000 a year in license fees just in the first 12 months, with those savings compounding over time. Now, of course, every case is different, but the decision rule is straightforward. If the owned system costs less to build than the first year savings, payback can arrive in under a year. And after that, recurring savings increase operating profit and, depending on the valuation multiple, even enterprise value. So stepping back, there are plenty of ways to start using AI. A lot of companies begin by rolling out general tools like ChatGPT Enterprise across the organization. But for deeper implementation work, we recommend a pretty specific sequence. First, replace one painful SaaS system with software built around how the company works. Keep the old system available until the replacement is proven, and then transfer responsibility to an internal owner. That gives the company an owned foundation for the next step. Next, add AI agents on top of that foundation. The agents can use the company's data, workflow rules, and measures of success, while the underlying model remains replaceable. And once the company understands where AI is reliable, where it's erratic, and where people need to stay involved, it can start exploring new territory. Now that might mean a new revenue path, or a new service, or a problem with no existing playbook. So test one idea against a business result, and then build on what works. So the investment case depends on two facts moving together. Models are taking on longer work, while the companies reporting the most value are redesigning workflows and putting senior leaders in charge. Our field experience adds a newer conclusion. Current models, reusable code, and open source building blocks have cut build time enough that replacing one SaaS system at a time can make economic sense. I'm happy to keep renting these frontier models because they will keep improving. But the source code, the data, the workflow rules, and the operating knowledge should always stay within the company.